But to ask 48 people to go down to where 2 people want, that just seems to me unfair, not to mention when poll after poll shows where the American people want us to be is not where Mr. Manchin is.
Bernie Sanders has had it with Joe Manchin and his wavering on the $3.5 trillion spending bill. Now, I have a couple clips here to show you, and in the second one, you'll really see him go after what Joe Manchin calls entitlement mentality, but then flips it on Manchin, and I'm going to get even deeper into that. But first here, let's go to this clip that I think perfectly encapsulates how the mainstream press has failed, even in their good coverage of this topic, has failed to properly frame the debate around this budget bill. But Bernie Sanders here does a great job at reframing this discussion.
We got 48 senators who support $3.5 trillion. We got 2 who do not. Now, to be very honest with you, as I think all of you know, I believe that our current healthcare system is totally dysfunctional. And I strongly, strongly believe in a Medicare for All single-payer program. I could, in 5 minutes, go to Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, and say, Chuck, I can't support this bill unless you have a Medicare for All provision in there. But I'm not going to do that because I don't know how many, maybe half the members of the caucus, a third of the members of the caucus support that. It would be irresponsible. So my concern with Mr. Manchin is not so much what his views are. I disagree with him. But it is that it is wrong. It is really not playing fair that 1 or 2 people think that they should be able to stop what 48 members of the Democratic caucus want, what the American people want, what the President of the United States wants. That would be my position. So Senator Manchin has a right to fight for his point of view. He has not only a right to be heard, he has a right to get some compromises. He's a member of the Senate. But 2 people do not have the right to sabotage what 48 want and what the President of the United States wants. That, to me, is wrong.
So I love how Bernie reframes the discussion here. It is 48 versus 2. This is what is often not discussed in the mainstream press, again, even in their good coverage of this, in the reality of this debate. It is not the moderates versus the progressives or even the conservatives versus the progressives. It is 48 versus 2. That is what is happening right now in the Senate. And that needs to be properly framed when discussing this fight. Now, the compromise part. So Bernie mentions here, as I've discussed as well in the past on this budget bill, the 3.5 trillion is a compromise. So Bernie compromised from 10 trillion down to 6 trillion, 6 trillion down to 3.5 trillion. And at no time was Medicare for all even on the table. So from the start, Bernie has already been compromising, and Manchin expects him, or not him, but the entirety of the caucus to compromise even further to Manchin's position. Can you imagine if the roles were reversed, where Bernie was fighting to not support the budget bill because Medicare for all was not in it, and it was 48 or 49 versus 1? Like, that would never happen because Bernie understands he wants some kind of progress, and he knows he's not going to get Medicare for all passed if he just holds out on everything. But he understands that he can get some actual progress done if he works with people that don't normally agree with him, and that's what he's doing here on 3.5 trillion. Now, not only is Bernie compromising, but Manchin is also compromising against himself. As back in January, he called for up to $4 trillion in infrastructure spending as Democrats are poised to control Congress. So this is right when Biden was about to be sworn in, and you had here Manchin calling for $4 trillion, but now 3.5 is too much. It's all just a game, and he really doesn't care about what people want. This is a recent Quinnipiac poll. So in terms of do you support or oppose 3.5 trillion spending bill, support 57%, oppose 40%. And of course, many polls show the same thing. The Data for Progress poll shows the exact same thing. Majority of voters support the provisions of the Build Back Better plan. You can look at the net favorables here and all of them. It is all either a majority or a plurality of Americans support everything in the budget bill. Everything. And I went deeper into this in my in a recent video going over these numbers. But one last thing here I want to share. Fun fact from Davis Rhoda here. Bernie Sanders received more West Virginia Democratic primary votes in 2016 than Joe Manchin received in his 2018 re-election bid. So Bernie is more popular in West Virginia than Joe Manchin. Now, this flies in the face of everything you've heard about how Joe Manchin has to be a conservative because he is a conservative state. Well, if you ran as a populist, ran on these more popular economic issues, Joe Manchin would likely be even more popular than he currently is. Because again, this isn't about right versus left, red versus blue. This is about the actual details, the actual policy details of what is in the budget bill or what was in Bernie's agenda in 2016, which is, again, going to helping people where they need it, be it Medicare for all, be it free college, be it higher taxes on the wealthy to help pay for certain things. So you have here, Bernie is with the people on the policy issues. You look at polling on any of those, especially economic issues, the vast majority of people, including conservative voters, lean progressive on those issues. But that is often what you will not hear in in mainstream outlets. Now, let me go to the next clip here, which goes to Manchin and this thing he's brought up about how he doesn't want to enable entitlement mentality. So Bernie tackles this.
Now, Senator Manchin, as I understand it, talked about today about not wanting to see our country become an entitlement society. Well, I am not exactly sure what he means by that. Does that mean that we end the $300 direct payments for working class parents, which have cut childhood poverty in this country as a result of the American Rescue Plan in half? Is protecting working families and cutting childhood poverty and entitlement? Does Senator Manchin think we should once again have one of the highest levels of childhood poverty of any major country on earth? But the time is long overdue for him to tell us with specificity, not generalities, we're beyond generalities, with specificity, what he wants and what he does not want, and to explain that to the people of West Virginia and America.
All right, so I'll get to the specificity question in a second here, as Manchin has since come out and has been, I guess, a little more specific, kind of, in what he wants, but I'll get to that. But first here, Bernie, so that part about entitlement went on for like 4 minutes. I wasn't going to show you the whole clip because it's too long, but he goes over a lot of the provisions in that spending bill and basically says, does Joe Manchin want to see kids remain in poverty? Does Joe Manchin want to see seniors be unable to eat because they can't afford dental, hearing, and vision? And, you know, has that same framing on each of these issues. And again, it's about the framing here. A fantastic way to frame this. Does Joe Manchin not want to help people? Does Joe Manchin want to see people go sick? This is how, because ultimately this is what Joe Manchin is enabling. By him not supporting the spending bill, that means, yes, he wants to see kids in poverty. He wants to see seniors with no teeth, with unable to hear, unable to see. He wants to see young people who can't afford college to be unable to get educated. This is how you properly frame this discussion. Now, on the entitlement part, so I have a whole video on this. I'm not going to get too deep into it, as deep as I went in that video, but I'll link to that above and below this. But just on some of those points, the idea of Joe Manchin complaining about entitlement mentality when he makes $500,000 a year from one of the dirtiest coal plants in West Virginia just by sitting on his ass. He personally this isn't donations. He makes this money himself. Also, Joe Manchin's dad gave him his first job. Talk about entitlement mentality. Manchin grew up in West Virginia, where his father owned a furniture store, and he attended West Virginia University on a football scholarship. Entitlement mentality. But this, as I said in my video on Joe Manchin's entitlement, it's one thing if he grew up with a certain perspective where he came from nothing and, you know, did everything himself, worked his way up. And again, even in those stories, you have people around you that you rely on, and often the system helps you. At least it did back, 50 years ago. But that isn't even the case here. This is a case where Joe Manchin is incredibly entitled, and he's complaining about children getting pulled out of poverty. It is just incredible that anyone in the press takes him seriously. They should be laughing in his face when he makes these points. More here. So on the update to the specificity part of it, Manchin is now telling colleagues that progressives need to pick just one of President Biden's 3 signature policies for helping working families and discard the other 2. People familiar with the matter tell Axios. But why? Like this, I saw this tweet from Cody Johnson here, and it's exactly on point. He says, again, this is completely arbitrary. He'd say of 6 signature policies, pick 3. of 9 signature policies, pick 5. His only guiding principle is, quote, do less than you want to do. This is exactly right. Manchin does not care about what is in the bill. He doesn't care. I mean, he does care in the sense that it impacts his donors. But in terms of his negotiating here, he doesn't care about the specifics. He just wants you to have less than what is already in it. It is the exact same approach that he applied to the checks that went out at the beginning of the year. He wanted those cut down for no reason at all. He just wanted them cut down. This is why when it comes to negotiating, when it comes to coming to the table with your proposal, these people like Bernie always have to go much, much higher than what they actually want. Because when it gets cut down, at least you're closer to a position that you ultimately want. But if you start with the compromise, then you're going to get even less. And even you saw, again, Bernie started with 10 trillion, cut down to 6, cut down to 3.5. It's going to be cut down again. So he has, I mean, even in what I'm saying here, when he's come to the table with much more than I guess he expected to get, it's still, he's getting a fraction of what ultimately he started off with. So in all of these negotiations, it's always about having to appeal to the lowest common denominator, this being 2 senators, because of their corporate backing and really no other reason except for the fact that their donors don't want all of this passed. And they want to seem like they are, working with the other side, when in reality, Manchin here is getting almost everything, and everyone else has to compromise down to a fraction of what they initially wanted. But that's this whole process. So I still don't know how this is going to pass. Especially Manchin, I think you can get if the number's low enough. But when it comes to Kyrsten Sinema, no one knows what she wants. She doesn't appear to be communicating what she actually wants, though all reports seem to indicate that she is simply doing the bidding of her big donor. She went to Arizona for a big fundraiser out of nowhere in the middle of these negotiations. So I don't know how you get Sinema's vote. I think ultimately that's the biggest obstacle here. And Bernie also briefly mentioned her in that press conference as well. But the issue he has with her is he doesn't know what to debate here because she's not saying anything. So it's hard to negotiate with somebody who isn't telling you what problem they have with the bill. But this is going to continue. At some point, I imagine a budget bill will pass, but what it will look like at that point, who knows?